Hello and welcome to my channel. This is a drawing of a moose I did a while back, and now I want to do a longer narrated video and talk a little bit more about the drawing process and also about some other things that might be interesting, like for example how you can create areas of lighter value without actually using an eraser, and also how you can create a nice looking background without actually doing too much work with a pencil. Let's have a look. By the way, the pencil that I'm using is a soft charcoal pencil. It's a Kohinoor Gioconda charcoal pencil. Nowadays I mostly use woodless charcoal pencil, but this one is also pretty good. Now you can see here that I started working on this grass on the left, and that some white lines are already showing up. How is that possible? Well, because I already created some indentations with a pointed stick. So when I went over those lines with a charcoal pencil, the white lines simply showed up. This is a technique that I often use with drawing beards and white hair and things like that. But it's just one way you can reserve the white space when you're trying to create areas of lighter value or when you're trying to create some highlights. Now naturally I will have to go over that and work on it a little bit more to create a little bit more of a convincing looking grass, give it more depth and structure. But for now I'll leave it here and work on the fur. Now the thing about drawing fur is that there are a couple of things that you need to remember. First, in order to imitate the realistic appearance or the realistic texture of the fur, you have to try to draw in the direction of the fur. So you have to make your strokes in the direction of the fur. And the second thing you need to remember, of course, is to make sure that the length of your strokes matches the length of the fur, because the length of the fur varies in different parts of the body of the animal. So it tends to be shorter around the head and the legs, for example, and it tends to be longer around the neck and the belly and some other areas. So you have to try to match that with your pencil strokes. Now when you create those strokes, you also have to try to change their direction just a little bit, not to make it too uniform. But once you do that, it kind of looks like a bit of a mess, but once you go over it with a brush, it actually starts to look pretty good. Charcoal can be blended pretty well, and it's pretty dark, but when you go over it with a brush, you get some more additional value, and these lines do become softer. So if you've been patient with laying down your strokes and trying to imitate the appearance of the fur, once you go over it with a brush, you'll end up with a realistic looking fur, and everything will become a lot softer and it will appear to have a lot more volume and density. So now I'm going back in with a pencil eraser and trying to refine the appearance of that grass or reed, whatever it is, on the left. Because this moose is drinking water and he is near a lake or a river, whatever, so I need to draw that grass, and then I'm going to try to finish the moose, and then I have to do the background and of course the water and the reflections. Now the reason why I picked this reference photo was because of the nice contrast between the lighter and darker areas of his fur, and also on the horns as well. But now as I'm moving on to the legs and the head especially, you will see that the strokes will be getting shorter and that the fur there is also obviously going to be getting shorter. These horns are fairly complex. So if I sometimes feel like I need a little bit more value or texture in certain areas of the moose's body. I can go over it with a charcoal pencil, and then it will naturally produce a little bit more texture. And if I feel that I need to knock that back a little bit and soften the texture, I can always go over it with a tortillon or a brush. But if I want to leave some of that rough texture, I can just leave it like that, unblended. So now I'm working on the neck, and there's also an area around the neck and under the jaw that has a little bit longer hair, so I'm going to need to do that as well. But for now, this hair here around the neck is a little bit shorter than on the rest of the body, and you can see how nicely I'm softening everything with a brush. The brush that I'm using is a hard, stiff bristle brush, and it pushes the charcoal nicely around. Now for the background, I just decided to do some leftovers from sharpening. Just use a little bit of that charcoal dust and spread it around by using my tortillons and brushes, and I can also use my fingers in larger areas as well. But around these areas which require a little more precision around the horns, I will use a tortillon with a nice tip just to create a nice clean edge there. But for the rest of it, I can just spread it around carelessly with my finger and create a soft, out of focus looking background, with just some suggestions of maybe some foggy landscape in the back, or maybe some trees, who knows. So now I'm working on the horns and here it's very important to try to create an illusion of depth, so that some parts of it look like they're in front of the others. Because that will help me create that 3D appearance of the animal. And of course, shading here is the key. You can see that I shaded this mostly with a tortillon. Now the thing is that a tortillon usually doesn't produce a lot of texture. It usually blends everything very smoothly. Unlike the brush, because the brush tends to allow you to leave some of the strokes visible. It tends to allow you to retain some of the texture. But tortillons tend to destroy that texture, so maybe if I feel like I need a little more texture in those horns to imitate the appearance of the bone, I'll just go over it again with a charcoal pencil and make everything a little more rough and give it just a little more texture. The hair is really short here around the eyes and the nose. And when you're trying to draw a really short fur, as seen from a distance, you don't even need to do normal pencil strokes. You can just do a little bit of scribbling and circular motions and just hope that the paper and the pencil will produce grainy texture that will kind of look like fur, as seen, short fur as seen from a distance. And if you feel like you need to add some more detail and refine it a little bit, you can always go back in and just put in more detail with your pencil, even though that's the slower way to do it. But the quicker way to do it is just to allow your pencil to work for you. So if it's producing some texture, you should use that texture to your advantage, obviously. But you can't do that where the fur is a little bit longer. There you have to do the thing that I already mentioned at the beginning of the video. You have to match the length of the fur with your strokes, and also you have to match the direction as well. I think now you can see where I'm going with the background as well, because the background is going to be very light and blurry. That's the second thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit, because often the background can be too distracting, and when you have a nice and interesting subject, sometimes you really don't need to do much with the background, because sometimes less is simply more. And a blurry and out of focus background with little detail in it can help you create what some artists call tension, because you have a nice detailed subject in the foreground with a lot more texture and cleaner edges and contrast and darker values, while as a contrast to that, in the background you have very light values, very little contrast, and hardly any edges or texture. So it is this contrast that allows you to kind of direct the focus of the viewer to your subject. Now you can see how I used my pencil eraser to refine the appearance of the fur and pull some highlights. Now here's another trick that I wanted to share with you. Sometimes when these highlights or these lighter hairs on the fur don't need to be very light, what you can also do is use tortillon. You can use a clean tortillon and just go over some of these darker areas, and the tortillon will pull some of the charcoal up and it will create soft highlights. So you can use that instead of a pencil eraser if you want less contrast, if you want softer highlights. But if you want some of these lighter hairs to really stand out, and if you want more contrast, then naturally you will use a pencil eraser. And the pencil eraser that I'm using, the white thing on the left, by the way, that's a Koh-i-Noor pencil eraser. It serves me well. It can be sharpened, and it helps me pull some nice thin highlights. Here you can see I'm just trying to create some simple reflections in the water, doing that with my finger. It's very quick and easy. I don't need to put any more detail in it. I don't want any more detail in the background or the water. Just a few ripples here and there, and just a few reflections where you would expect areas of darker value, and that's pretty much it. You can also see that, again, I'm using my pencil eraser to pull some of these highlights and further refine the texture of that short hair on the nose and the head to really make it a lot more interesting. So like I said, there are several ways to create those areas of lighter value. You can reserve the white space, you can create indentations with a stick, you can erase it with an eraser, but you can also lift up some of that charcoal with a tortillon without even using an eraser. But naturally, if the tortillon picks up too much charcoal, it won't do that. It has to be clean. This area here around the shoulders and the upper back needs to be really light, so as you can see I made that a lot lighter, and there are some nice shadows on the horns as well. So now I'm just kind of softening everything and cleaning it up and putting down some finishing touches. I'm going to put my signature here, and I often like to put my signature on the opposite side. If the drawing is asymmetrical and most of the animal is on one side, I like to put my signature on the other side for the sake of balance, to create a more balanced composition. So that would be it for this narrated video of my drawing of a moose. I hope you'll like it. Give me a like, subscribe and comment, and also check out my other videos. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.